The first thing I heard was my sister's voice, and she wasn't talking to me. She was talking about me. "She's not going to need the house," Renata said, somewhere past the curtain, past the beeping machine that had apparently been keeping time for me for 11 days. "The doctor said even if she wakes up, she won't be functional, not like before." I lay there with my eyes still too heavy to open, my mouth dry as chalk, and I listened to my own sister divide my life into past tense. "The lake house goes to me and Marcus," she continued, and I heard the soft shuffle of paper, actual paper, being moved across a table. "Mom's rings go to Danielle since she's the oldest granddaughter. And the business, well, Dad already signed off on transferring her shares to the family trust. It's cleaner this way. Nobody has to fight over what's hers if there's no hers anymore." My eyes opened on that sentence. Nobody noticed. The curtain was still between us. I lay very still and let them keep talking because some instinct older than fear told me, "Don't let them know you're back yet. Not until you understand what you woke up into." My name is Wren Calloway, and 11 days before I opened my eyes to that conversation, I had been the kind of person nobody worried about because I never gave anyone a reason to. I was 34 years old. I ran the finance side of Calloway and Associates, the accounting firm my grandmother, Edith Calloway, had built from a single rented desk in 1971 into a firm with 18 employees and a client list that stretched across 3 counties. I wasn't the face of the company. That was my father, Harold, who had inherited the title of president, the way some men inherit a good watch, because it was handed to him, not because he'd built the mechanism inside it. I was the mechanism. I'd been the one who rebuilt the client database after the 2019 server crash. I was the one who caught the 6-figure discrepancy in the Meridian account that turned out to be an employee skimming for 2 years. I was the one Grandma Edith called every Sunday night, not my father, not my sister Renata, to talk through the numbers and the feel of the business, because she said I was the only one who understood that a ledger was really just a story about people, written in decimals. Grandma Edith passed 8 months before my accident. She was 89. She died the way she'd lived, with her affairs in perfect order, a will filed with her lawyer of 40 years, Nathaniel Prout, and a house full of family who cried at the funeral, and then, within a week, began quietly asking each other what everything was worth. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Grandma had told me more than once over tea in her sunroom with the yellow curtains, "Wren, I've made sure you're taken care of. Not because you need saving, but because you're the only one of them who'd give it all away to keep the peace, and I won't have that happen after I'm gone." I'd laughed it off at the time. "Grandma, I'm not a martyr." "No," she'd said, stirring her tea slowly. "You're worse. You're reasonable asterisk. Reasonable people let unreasonable people win because fighting feels undignified. I raised your father, so believe me, I know." I didn't understand what she meant. Not fully. Not until I woke up in a hospital bed and heard my family sorting my life into an estate. The accident itself is a blank page in my memory, and everyone who describes it to me afterward tells it a little differently, which I've since learned is the first thing you notice when people start rewriting a story around you. No 2 versions match, and the mismatches are where the truth hides. What I've pieced together: I was driving home from the office on a Tuesday night, wet roads. A delivery truck ran a red light on Corbin and 9th. My car was hit broadside. I was extracted by the fire department, airlifted to St. Agnes Medical, and by the time my family arrived, I was already in surgery for a subdural hematoma and a shattered femur. The coma that followed wasn't supposed to be long. The neurologist, Dr. Amrita Osai, told my father in the first 72 hours that these things were unpredictable, but often resolve within 1 to 2 weeks in cases with this presentation. My father relayed this information to my sister Renata with, apparently, a different inflection entirely. Because Renata, who had spent her whole life standing 1/2 step behind me at every family gathering, every award, every mention of and Wren's doing so well at the firm, did not hear unpredictable but often resolves. She heard asterisk opportunity. I don't say that lightly. I say it because of what I heard from behind that curtain on day 11, and because of everything I would spend the next 4 months uncovering. Let me tell you who was in that room, dividing my life like a Thanksgiving carcass, because you need to understand the architecture of betrayal before you can appreciate how it comes apart. Harold Calloway ***, my father, 61, a man who had spent his life mistaking inherited comfort for earned competence. He loved me the way people love furniture they've had a long time, fondly, absently, without ever really looking at it. He was not cruel. He was *convenient. Whatever required the least friction was what Harold believed. Renata Calloway Fisk ***, my older sister by 3 years, married to Marcus Fisk ***, a real estate developer with an easy smile and a habit of speaking about opportunities, the way other men spoke about weather. Renata had wanted the lake house since she was 19. Renata had wanted a great many things since she was 19, and had spent 15 years perfecting the art of wanting them out loud in rooms where I stayed quiet. Danielle ***, Renata's 26-year-old daughter, my niece, sweet in the specific way of someone who has never had to be anything else, because someone was always managing the hard parts for her. And on the periphery, materializing exactly twice a year at holidays, Uncle Desmond ***, my father's younger brother, who had a habit of showing up whenever an estate was being settled and vanishing the second actual work needed doing. They were in the family lounge outside the ICU, and later I'd learned they'd been having some version of this conversation for 8 straight days, refining it like a pitch deck. The line that stopped my heart wasn't the lake house, or the rings, or even the business shares. It was this, spoken by my own father, in the flat, tired voice of a man reading from a document. Prute drew up the paperwork last week. I signed as her power of attorney. It's done. Power of attorney. I had never signed a power of attorney document authorizing my father to act for me. I'd had a simple will, drafted the year Grandma Edith died, at her insistence, that named my closest friend and the executor of my choosing, a woman named Priya Anand, not my father. Not anyone in that room. Someone had signed something, and it wasn't me. I want to tell you that I sat up in that bed and confronted them right there, machine wires and all, and demanded answers. That's the version that would play well as a hook, and maybe that's the version some of you are hopping for. That's not what happened. What happened is I lay there, heart rate climbing on a monitor no one was watching closely enough, and I made the first of many quiet decisions that would define the next 4 months of my life. I would let them believe I was still gone, until I understood exactly what gone had cost me. It took every ounce of discipline I had. My throat burned. My leg, still pinned and healing, throbbed with every breath. But I kept my eyes half-lidded, my breathing slow and shallow, and I listened as my family's voices moved from grief-adjacent murmuring into the crisp, practiced cadence of people finalizing a plan. Prute said the trust transfer needs Wren's signature or a valid POA, my father was saying. I have the POA, it's notarized, we're fine. And if she wakes up? Danielle asked, the only voice in the room that sounded even faintly uneasy. There was a pause. Then Renata, quiet and even, "Sweetheart, the doctor said if she wakes up, she might not be herself. We're not doing anything wrong. We're protecting the business. Grandma would want the business protected." Grandma would want the business protected. I lay very still, and inside the stillness, something in me that had spent 34 years being reasonable. The exact word Grandma Edith had used, sitting in her sunroom with her tea going cold, went very quiet and very cold itself. A nurse came in not long after to check my vitals, and I let my eyes flutter open just enough, just for her, just a flicker, before closing them again. She noted something on her chart. She didn't say anything to the family. I would learn later her name was Carla, and that small, unremarked flicker of consciousness, logged, dated, time-stamped in a hospital chart neither Renata nor my father thought to request, would become the first thread in unraveling everything they thought they'd already finished dividing. I wasn't awake yet, not to them, but I was already, quietly, keeping score. I woke up for real, for them, 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, with Dr. Osai in the room and my father reading something on his phone in the corner chair, not even looking up until the machines changed their rhythm. "Wren," Dr. Osai's voice was calm, professional, close. "Can you squeeze my hand?" I squeezed it. I let my eyes open slowly, let confusion play across my face, not entirely performance, since 11 days of coma and 2 days of silent eavesdropping had left me genuinely disoriented about time, about my body, about the ache in my leg, but not about what I'd heard. My father's head snapped up. "Wren! Oh, thank God!" He was at my bedside in 3 steps, and there were real tears in his eyes, which unsettled me more than anger would have. Grief and guilt, I was learning, could live in the same face without contradiction. "Where's," I let my voice crack, rasp from disuse, "where's everyone?" "Renata's getting coffee. Danielle's at work, she'll come by tonight." He squeezed my hand. "You scared us, kid." I studied him. 61 years old, soft around the middle, the kind of tan that came from golf courses rather than labor. I had spent my whole life extending him the benefit of the doubt because he was my father, and because extending benefit of the doubt was, apparently, my signature move. I looked at him now and asked, as gently and as vaguely as I could manage. "Dad, did something happen with the business? I think I dreamed something about paperwork." I watched it land. I watched the flicker of calculation cross his face before the practiced warmth resettled over it like a sheet pulled taut. "Don't worry about any of that right now," he said. "Just focus on getting better. Everything's handled." Everything's handled. 2 days earlier, I would have heard comfort in that sentence. Now I heard a confession. Recovery gave me cover. For the first 10 days after waking, I was genuinely weak, my leg in a fixation brace, my balance unreliable, my speech occasionally slow to catch up with my thoughts. Everyone treated me like glass, which meant everyone also, conveniently, stopped watching what I did with my phone. The first person I called, from the hospital bathroom with the water running so the sound would cover my voice, was Priya Anand. Priya had been my closest friend since business school, now a contracts attorney with her own small practice 2 towns over. She was also, on paper, the executor of my actual will and the person I'd listed as my healthcare proxy, a document my father seemed to have either forgotten existed or decided didn't matter. "Wren," her voice cracked with relief, "I've been trying to see you for a week. Your dad told the front desk I wasn't on the approved visitor list." That detail alone told me everything I needed to know about how deliberately I'd been isolated. "Priya, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not tell anyone you're doing it. Talk to me. I need you to find out who notarized a power of attorney with my signature on it. I never signed one. I need to know who did, and when, and I need you to pull whatever public record exists on it before anyone thinks to hide it." There was a pause on the line, not hesitation, but the particular silence of a very good attorney recalculating a weekend's plans. "Okay," Priya said. "I'm already moving." 3 days later, Priya visited under the guise of just checking in on a friend, and slipped me a manila folder tucked inside a get well card, because by then we both understood the house, my hospital room, was not neutral ground. Inside was a copy of the notarized power of attorney. My signature was on it. It was, to an untrained eye, convincing, the loops of my W, the slant of my C. "It's not your signature," Priya said quietly, sitting close so her voice wouldn't carry. "I had it compared against 3 verified samples from your firm's files. The forensic document examiner I used says it's a decent forgery, but decent isn't perfect. There's hesitation in the stroke pressure. Someone traced this rather than wrote it freehand. Who notarizes something without the person present? That's the interesting part." Priya pulled out a second sheet. "The notary is a man named Gerald Voss, public notary, works out of a UPS store 40 minutes from here. I called his office pretending to be doing a routine file audit for an estate matter. He confirmed he notarized a POA for a Wren Calloway on the 9th, the day you were still in the ICU, unconscious, per the hospital's own admission log." I felt something in my chest go very still and very clear. The way a lake goes, still right before a storm breaks. "There's more," Priya said, and slid over a third document, a printed nursing note. I asked a friend in medical records to check something for me, off the books, because a chart entry from a nurse named Carla Ibanez logged voluntary I response and tracking on the day before your father signed as your POA. Which means, on paper, there's documentation you were already showing signs of consciousness before he claimed you were incapacitated enough to require one. I remembered Carla. I remembered that small, unremarked flicker I'd allowed her to see. He didn't check, I said slowly. He didn't even check my actual chart. He just went ahead. Wren. Priya's voice was gentle but firm, the tone of someone who had delivered hard truths for a living for over a decade. This isn't a family being hasty with grief. This is elder well in your case, asterisk incapacity, asterisk fraud. Forged signature, false notarization, backdated to precede documented signs of consciousness. This is a felony, in multiple directions. I sat with that for a long moment, staring at the ugly, cheerful daisies on my hospital blanket. Then I asked the question that mattered more to me than any statute. Do you think Renata knew it was forged, or did she just let herself not ask? Priya's silence answered for her. While Priya worked the legal angle, I worked mine, which required admitting something to myself I'd avoided for 8 months. I needed to talk to Nathaniel Prout, my grandmother's lawyer, and I needed to do it without my father finding out. Prout was 73, silver-haired, the kind of old-school attorney who still kept paper files in a locked cabinet in addition to digital backups. When I called him from a burner-cheap phone Priya had bought me, using the code phrase Grandma had apparently left him, the sunroom key. His voice changed instantly from professional caution to something warmer. Wren, good God, are you calling from the hospital? I'm calling because I think someone forged my signature to seize control of my shares in the firm, and I think it happened while I was in a coma. There was a long exhale on the line. I wondered when this call would come, Prout said. Your grandmother left instructions with me, sealed instructions, Wren, to be opened only if her words, the family shows its true shape while Wren can't defend herself. She was very specific. She said, and I quote directly from her letter, my family loves easily and protects poorly. If they ever move against Wren while she cannot move for herself, open this. I sat in a hospital bathroom, phone pressed hard against my ear, and felt tears finally arrive, not from grief, but from something closer to being seen 3 months after she died, by a woman who'd apparently understood her family better than any of them understood themselves. What's in it? A codicil to her will, executed 4 months before her death, which was never read at the original will reading because it was sealed under specific conditions. It restructures the ownership of her original founding shares, the 20% she retained personally, and which everyone assumed reverted equally to your father and Desmond. It does not. It transfers those shares, along with controlling authority over any future ownership disputes, directly and irrevocably to you, effective upon any attempt by another family member to seize your assets while you are incapacitated. I had to ask him to repeat it because I genuinely could not process it the first time. Grandma Edith hadn't just protected me. She'd built a trap, calibrated precisely to spring only if her family proved her right about them, and left it sealed, waiting, like a promise she hoped she'd never have to keep. She loved them, Prout said quietly, into my silence. That's important for you to understand, Wren. This isn't about hatting your father or Renata. Your grandmother told me she hoped this envelope would sit in my safe forever, unopened, because that would mean her family had proven her wrong. She wasn't trying to punish them in advance. She was trying to protect you in case she couldn't be wrong. How do we do this properly? I asked. I don't want a war. I want the truth on paper done right. Then let's build the case the same way your grandmother built the company, Prout said. Quietly, thoroughly, and so airtight that no one can later say it wasn't fair. The next 6 weeks were the hardest kind of patience I've ever practiced, harder than physical therapy, harder than relearning how to climb stairs without gripping the rail like a lifeline. I had to go home to my father's house because my own apartment lease had lapsed during the coma, and the family had decided, without asking me, that I'd obviously recover better surrounded by everyone. I let them believe I was grateful. I sat at family dinners and watched Renata pick out fabric swatches for the lake house's guest room, a room I'd once talked about renovating together with Grandma Edith, before either the Coma or the money existed as a battlefield. I watched Danielle wear my grandmother's rings to a friend's engagement party, sliding them onto fingers that had never once helped balance the company books. I watched my father grow visibly more relaxed with each passing week, mistaking my silence for the same passivity he'd always assumed was my whole personality. Meanwhile, Priya built the forgery case with a forensic examiner's sworn affidavit. Prut prepared the codicil for formal probate filing. And I, quietly, using nothing but my badge access, which nobody had thought to revoke because nobody imagined I'd use it against them, pulled 6 months of financial records from Callaway and Associates and found something even Prut hadn't anticipated. Marcus, Renata's husband, had been quietly diverting small development contracts through the firm's referral network for 18 months, kicking inflated, consulting fees back to a shell LLC he controlled, small enough not to trigger the usual audits, large enough over time to have skimmed nearly $250,000. My family hadn't just moved to seize my shares while I lay unconscious. They'd been quietly bleeding the company for over a year before I ever hit that intersection on Corbin and 9th. Prut called a formal meeting under the guise of closing out remaining matters from Edith's estate, reasonable enough, 6 months after her death, that nobody questioned it. Everyone assumed it would be a formality. My father even joked, loading the car, that we'd be home in time for the game. The meeting took place in Prut's office, dark wood and green-shaded lamps, the kind of room built to make people speak carefully. My father sat with easy confidence. Renata sat beside Marcus, her hand on his arm. Danielle fidgeted with Grandma's ring. Uncle Desmond, predictably, arrived 4 minutes late, with an excuse about traffic. I sat at the end of the table, in the chair Prut had quietly reserved for me, and said almost nothing while he laid out the codicil first, clean, calm, factual. The room's temperature seemed to drop with every sentence. And per the specific conditions outlined by Edith Callaway, activated upon evidence of an attempt to seize Wren Callaway's assets during a period of medical incapacitation, full transfer of the retained founding shares, along with dispute resolution authority, passes to Wren, effective as of the date such an attempt is documented. "This is absurd," my father said too quickly. "There was no attempt. I had power of attorney. I was protecting the business." "About that," Prut said, and slid the forged POA across the table, alongside the forensic examiner's affidavit, and a certified copy of Nurse Ibanez's chart entry, timestamped the day before his signature. "Would you like to explain the discrepancy between this document's date and your daughter's documented neurological status at that time? Or would you prefer we discuss it with the district attorney's office, who I understand has already opened a preliminary file at the request of Ms. Annan's client?" My father's face went the color of old paper. Renata found her voice before he found his. "Wren, we thought you might not." "You thought I might not wake up myself," I said, and it was the first full sentence I'd spoken since entering the room. My voice didn't shake, which surprised me more than it seemed to surprise anyone else. "I remember that conversation, Renata. I was awake for most of it. I heard you decide the lake house was yours before you'd even checked whether I was going to survive the week." The silence that followed had weight to it, the kind you could have set a glass down on. "And Marcus," I continued, sliding the second folder across the table before he could speak, "we should talk about Meridian Development and Halbrook Consulting, and why an LLC registered to your cousin's address has been invoicing my grandmother's company for 18 months for consulting work nobody in this room can describe." Marcus didn't go pale. He went very, very still, which told me everything about which family member had actually understood the risk he was carrying into that room. What followed wasn't shouting. Grandma Edith hadn't raised a family, or in my case, half-raised one, that knew how to fight loudly. What followed was worse, in its way. The slow, humiliating unraveling of people watching every excuse collapse under a fact they couldn't argue with. My father tried anger first. "You're going to do this to your own family, over a house, over some shares." "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm doing something asterisk about what already happened to me. There's a difference, even if you've never had to learn it." He tried guilt next, my mother's memory, the family name. What would Edith think? I let Prut answer that one, because Prut had, quite literally, Edith's own words in a sealed envelope, and there is nothing quite as final as being corrected by the dead in their own handwriting. Renata cried, and I believed the tears were real, which didn't change what they'd cost me. "I panicked," she said. I thought if you didn't wake up, at least we wouldn't be fighting over everything for months. I thought I was making it easier asterisk." "Easier for who?" I asked, and she didn't answer because there wasn't an answer that didn't indict her. Danielle slid Grandma's ring off her finger without being asked and placed it on the table, which was, of everyone in that room, the only gesture that day that didn't feel like strategy. Marcus said nothing at all. Some silences are confessions. "I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because quiet revenge doesn't mean nothing happens. It means what happens is measured, legal, and doesn't require me to become someone Grandma Edith wouldn't recognize." The forged POA became a matter for the district attorney. My father, facing a charge of fraud related to incapacity documents, accepted a plea agreement that included restitution, a formal censure from the state notary board against Gerald Voss, whose business, it turned out, quietly closed within the year, and a permanent removal from any officer role at Callaway and Associates. He did not go to prison. I didn't push for that. I pushed for the truth to be on record, not for my father to disappear. Marcus's arrangement with the Shell LLC became a civil matter, settled with a repayment schedule that would take him the better part of 6 years, and a development industry that, small as it was in our county, made sure everyone knew exactly why Marcus Fisk didn't get referred work anymore. Renata and I didn't have a courtroom reckoning. We had something slower and, I think, harder. An actual conversation, 8 months later in her kitchen, where she finally said the thing underneath all of it. "I spent my whole life being the one who wanted things and watched you get handed them without even trying. And when you were lying there and it looked like you might not need any of it anymore, some ugly part of me thought, finally, something's mine first." I didn't forgive her that day. I told her I understood the shape of the feeling, even if I couldn't excuse what she'd done with it. We are, as of this recording, still rebuilding, slowly, without pretending the last year didn't happen. The lake house is mine now, formally, under Grandma's codicil. I let Danielle keep visiting it. I did not let her keep the ring, not out of spite, but because some things need to be re-earned, not reassigned. 14 months after I woke up to my own eulogy in progress, I sit in Grandma Edith's sunroom, in her chair, with tea going cold exactly the way she always let hers go cold, mid-sentence, mid-thought. Callaway and Associates is mine to run outright now, not as the mechanism behind someone else's title, but as the name on the door. I kept my father's old office as a conference room. I didn't erase him from the building. I just stopped letting his name mean more than his contribution. I think about that 11-day gap in my memory sometimes, the accident itself, the part I'll never recover, and I've made a strange kind of peace with it. I lost 11 days. I gained, in exchange, a version of my family with no more illusions left to hide behind, and a clearer understanding of exactly who I could trust with the parts of my life I can't defend myself. Grandma used to say a ledger is a story about people, written in decimals. I understand now she was also talking about wills and trusts, and every quiet document she filed away for a day she hoped would never come. It came, and because of her I was ready for it, even unconscious, even silent. If there's one thing this year taught me, it's that the people who love you loudest in a crisis aren't always the ones who protected you before it. Sometimes protection looks like a quiet woman with cold tea and a locked filing cabinet, thinking 3 steps ahead of a family she loved, but never fully trusted to do the right thing on their own. I didn't get revenge. I got the truth, documented on the record, and a life rebuilt on my own terms instead of the terms other people assumed I wouldn't be around to argue with. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best, I hope you find your version of that locked cabinet. And I hope, when you open it, you find someone who saw you clearly the whole time. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, I'll see you in the next one.